Hi, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to the Federal and State Resource Series for California Promise Zones. First, I'd like to formally introduce myself. I'm Lori Udit, as Danette shared, the Los Angeles Field Office Director and Santa Ana Field Office Acting Director for the Department of Housing and Urban Development. And I work in the Office of Field Policy and Management, and it's my pleasure to launch this resource series today. I want to start by thanking the California Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development for helping us provide this series. I want to especially thank Mark Polemis for helping plan and coordinate today's gathering. Our goal today is to increase your awareness and access to federal and state resources to tackle the climate crisis. The panelists that you're going to hear from today will share information about their agency's resources to help build more resilient infrastructure, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, create well-paid jobs, and pursue environmental justice for disproportionately impacted communities. And I want to thank our colleagues from federal and state agencies who are participating in today's convening. So today we have representatives from the U.S. Environmental Protective Agency, the U.S. Department of Transportation, Federal Emergency Management Agency, the United States Department of Agriculture, our California Office of Planning and Research, Integrated Climate Adaptation and Resilience Program, the California Office of Emergency Services, Cal OES, Building Resilient Communities, California Energy Commission, and the California Department of Public Health, Climate Change, and Health Equity section. So as you can see, strong list of representatives from both federal and state agencies. Region 9 is honored to support 4 of the 12 promise zones designated by the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development. And I'm pleased to welcome Los Angeles Promise Zone, Sacramento Promise Zone, San Diego Promise Zone, and South Los Angeles Transit Empowerment Zone, Slate Z, to today's convening. Through the Promise Zone initiative, we are committed to working strategically in these communities in Los Angeles, San Diego, Sacramento, and South LA to boost economic activity and job growth, improve educational opportunities, improve public safety, and leverage public and private investments to improve residents' quality of life. I want to acknowledge and thank Zahira Mann, Julius Austin, CO Crespo, and Elder Sanabria for leading our Promise Zones. We value the critical work that your organizations and your community partners are doing to advance sustainable community solutions and equitable community development. We are committed to providing support and assistance to help your Promise Zones achieve the objectives of their designation. We realize that segregation, economic divestment, and underinvestment left Promise Zone communities grappling with numerous environmental issues. Promise Zone communities are among the most vulnerable to the effects of climate change due to poor quality of housing and infrastructure, proximity to environmental hazards, and economic instability. We know that addressing the climate change crisis and building equitable community resilience is particularly important to the communities served by our Promise Zones. Our session today addresses HUD's fiscal year 2022 to 2026 HUD Strategic Plan Goal 4, which is advancing sustainable communities by strengthening climate resilience and energy efficiency, promoting environmental justice, and recognizing housing's role as essential to health. As the federal agency dedicated to creating strong, sustainable, inclusive communities and quality, affordable homes, HUD is on the front lines of the nation's efforts to increase response to climate impacts. HUD's commitment to addressing climate change include climate resilience and adaptation, helping communities prepare for and equitably recover from natural disasters, reducing carbon emissions, significantly reducing energy use in HUD-supported housing, and switching to low carbon and zero carbon sources of energy, including solar. pursuing environmental justice, working to reverse disparities in exposure to environmental and real hazards for underserved communities. We want to help address and reverse these conditions by helping you access the federal and state resources to adapt to climate change and prepare for and recover from natural disasters and economic disruptions like COVID-19. Our federal and state panelists will share their funding opportunities, technical assistance, and resources to help Promise Zones address these issues. As Promise Zones, you are uniquely positioned to build collaborations that tackle adapting to the climate change crisis, build resilient infrastructures, and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We encourage you to reach out to our panelists following this convening to learn more about the resources they offer to advance sustainable communities. Your HUD community liaison, whether that's Michael, Danette, Alex, or Carol, is available to arrange those follow-up discussions with our federal and state agency partners. So again, thank you for your work and joining us for today's convening.
Thank you so much, Lori, for that welcome. I want to now transition to our partner in GO-Biz, and I'm going to pass this on to Michael Polimas to also give us a welcome from the California Governor's Office of Economic Development.
Great, thank you, Danette. I don't quite have as, and Lori, thank you very much for that introduction. I don't quite have as long and thorough words prepared for and for welcoming you all, but I appreciate everybody's time and commitment and being able to dedicate your time and efforts and commitment to the Promise Zone communities, especially the 4 that we have in California, 2 in LA, 1 in San Diego, and 1 in Sacramento. Where I will, whereas GO-Biz, we provide business as well as community support for economic and community development actions and goals pursued by local communities. And sorry, I'm playing dual roles here as I'm allowing others into the meeting. But I'll have some more information to share about our expanding roles and efforts in providing direct support to communities at the ground level in addressing kind of these inequities as a result of COVID-19. So I'm happy to introduce our new unit that I'll be covering in just a few moments. But again, like to welcome you all and appreciate your time and commitment and sharing your resources that you have available to these communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I'm hoping everyone can hear me clearly because I know sometimes there's a problem with my mic, so I apologize if there's any inability to hear me. I want to just kind of share with you a little bit about how we've approached this. As we've been building out these events, our goal has been to connect these gatherings around funding opportunities and technical assistance to HUD's strategic plan for the year of 2022 to 2026. Our goal is to create a nexus between the work that our Promise Zones are doing and also the goals of HUD for these next 5 years. And so in the area of environmental work, I want to just highlight to you that HUD has a series of strategic plan goals specifically aligned with advancing sustainable communities. We want to advance sustainable communities by strengthening climate resilience and energy efficiency and promoting environmental justice and recognizing housing role as essential to health. We also want to guide investment in climate resilience. We want to invest in climate resilience, energy efficiency, renewable energy across all of HUD's programs. Also, we want to strengthen environmental justice by reducing exposure to health risks, environmental hazards, substandard housing, especially in low-income neighborhoods and communities. We also want to integrate health with housing. And to that end, we're advancing policies that recognize housing's role as being essential to health. And so as we go over these 2 series, part 1 and part 2, all of the information that will be shared will in a way help HUD to advance these goals, but more importantly, help us to collaborate with you at a local and community level to advance these goals. And so I'm going to pass this back over to Mark to share a little bit of information about efforts that the governor's office has in these same issues.
Great, thank you, Danette. I'm going to share my screen and just want to make sure that I'm not sharing the presenter side. And while I do this, Ashley, I'm going to make you the host so that you can continue to allow individuals in, as I may not be able to see that with my screen shared. So just give me a sec. Got it. Great, you all see my slides?
Yes.
Great, I saw Danette's recognition. Thank you all. So as I mentioned before, the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development has primarily been, the state's economic development arm and resource for businesses to learn and understand and various incentives and opportunities for business growth in California. However, we are expanding our services to provide more economic development planning support to local agencies and to local governments and community-based organizations. Our team historically, our team is primarily comprised of business investment services, permit assistance, Office of Small Business Advocate, as well as international affairs and various incentive programs. But we've been expanding recently to address some of the emerging industries and priorities of the state, including energy and climate, community and local equity grants related to the recreational cannabis industry, and growing in an emerging community-based solutions unit. So in 2021, USEDA granted GO-Biz $2.35 million to pilot a new community-based solutions team. The CBS team comprises in-region representatives working to promote the services. Our agency offers work to support communities and regions as they create regional economic development strategies funded by the California Community Economic Resilience Fund, otherwise known as SURF. Our CBS team will develop an interconnected network of local practitioners, can creatively and effectively collaborate and share needs with the state and federal governments, as well as access available resources. So in total, the CBS team will comprise 21 economic development professionals providing support and implementing economic and community development programs across the state. There will be 13 regionally based economic development coordinators that will provide hands-on assistance to local economic development organizations, community-based organizations and jurisdictions and others to access state and federal resources. These 13 recovery coordinators will be managed by 3 super regional managers to support cross-regional collaboration and develop an economic community of practice. Myself, I'm our place-based solutions specialist, and I focus on supporting communities and utilizing place-based support mechanisms such as promise zones, opportunity zones, tax increment financing, and other locally initiated tools. And eventually we will onboard broadband actions plan specialists as well as a broadband permit specialist to support communities in implementation of the broadband for all. So we'll have 3 regional recovery managers. We've divided the state into economic super regions, and they will be responsible for supervising and leading regionally based economic recovery coordinators in their respective super region. In addition, this network of managers will identify and assist cross-regional economic and sector development efforts to ensure appropriate scaling of sector-based state and federal investments. Examples include emerging industries such as biomass and forest management industries along many regions in the Sierra Nevada and coastal redwoods, an emerging offshore wind industry considered for California's central and north coast communities. And so shown here, this is a breakdown of California's economic regions as developed under the SURF program. GO-Biz will employ a regional economic recovery coordinator for each region identified by a different color to assist local and regional economic development efforts and to assist with SURF implementation. These coordinators will provide technical assistance, grant support, and develop a regional economic recovery toolkit for their respective region. Each toolkit will identify workforce, economic, and community development funding opportunities specific to regional needs from government and philanthropic funding sources. So the leadership team comprises a community-based solution supervisor. Myself, I'm a place-based solution specialist, and we have vacancies for regional managers. I've highlighted those in which we have Promise Zone designations. So as you can see, this is an emerging team. We're in the process now of hiring many people. I think we only have about 5 or 6 of our 21 filled out so far. So for the Northern Mega Region, we'll have a recovery coordinator for Greater Sacramento, as well as the other territories shown here. For Central California. And finally, Southern California, where we have an opening and we have a vacancy, as well as we're recruiting for the Los Angeles County, and we will soon be onboarding a Southern Border representative, which will cover San Diego and Imperial counties. So that covers my overview of the CBS team, which we will, I'd be happy to introduce the economic recovery coordinators for each of the regions where we have a Promise Zone designation. So once the team gets filled out, we will have, in addition to myself, which is just like the one-man band of providing to liaison services to the Promise Zones, we'll have a team of on-the-ground practitioners who can help address economic and community development priorities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mark. I want to now transition to our panels, which I think is the part that everyone is excited about, is learning about the funding opportunities that are available through our federal and state agencies. And so now I'm going to turn over the session for our first panel, which is on federal agency resources, to Michael HUD, who is the community liaison for Sacramento.
Very much, Danette, and welcome to everyone who's attending. And we definitely want to just move right in and as soon as possible. And it's my pleasure to really introduce you to a panel, a group of federal panelists. We're really fortunate to have assembled a dream team of subject matter experts that are related to several climate resilient focused federal partners. And as was mentioned, we have the EPA, we have USDA, we have the transportation, and we have FEMA. So our panelists will each give brief answers to 2 prepared questions and talk about the resources they have for their agency. So to dive right in, the first question is, tell us about your resources that sustainable communities by strengthen sustainable communities by strengthening climate resilience and energy efficiency and promoting environmental justice. Those are some things that we've kind of been looking into. I'm going to start off here with our first panelist from the EPA. We have Scott Stolman. He is the Brownfields and Land Revitalization Project Manager. Scott, can you give us your reply to that first question?
Yeah, thanks, Michael. Good morning. How much time do I have, just so I don't go too long?
I think we have about 3 minutes for the question.
Okay. Yeah, again, my name's Scott Stolman. I'm out of our San Francisco EPA regional office. I also have a colleague of mine, Eric Bayous, who's on the line, who can help answer any questions that may come up. I'm going to mainly talk about our Brownfields program, and this program works at the intersection of economic development, environmental protection, and environmental justice. It's a program that is not a regulatory program. It is a voluntary program. you accept our funding or use our technical assistance resources voluntarily. For those of you who don't know, a brownfield is a property where its reuse or redevelopment may be complicated by the presence or the perceived or potential presence of contamination. And that can be hazardous substances, metals, lead from lead-based paint, asbestos, petroleum. And these are often in underserved neighborhoods. They can be former gas stations, former auto repair shops, dry cleaners, railroad facilities, dump sites, structure fires, or the remains of a fire, abandoned buildings and vacant lots. And I think you've all seen them. And they have negative impacts on our communities. They can be magnets for crime. They can have negative health impacts on the public. The blight can influence the surrounding neighborhood, and they reduce property values and investment. Our program offers grants and technical assistance, and the technical assistance is done by EPA contractors. And this work, both with the grants and the technical assistance, will support the assessment of brownfield sites to see if they're contaminated and with what. They'll support reuse planning for those sites, feasibility studies, market analyses, and they'll support cleanup of those sites. And there's many more activities that can be done right up to the actual redevelopment, which we don't fund. We've helped support railroad yards being turned into youth soccer complexes. Auto repair shops have been turned into affordable housing. And I know affordable housing is a priority of several of the Promise Zone communities. And going forward, we're looking to do things like help convert brownfield sites into EV or electric vehicle charging stations. The biggest news is that the infrastructure law is providing us with a huge increase in funding, $1.5 billion for brownfields projects over the next several years. It's historic. And an emphasis will be on funding communities that are underserved. So I think that's all I have for that first question, and I'll tell you how to access that funding, I think, with the next question later.
That's perfect. Thank you so much, Scott. Really great information. Let's go ahead and see if we can dive right into our next panelist from the Department of Transportation.
Hey, Michael, you went on mute.
Okay, sorry about that. We have our panelists from the Department of Transportation, Antonio Johnson, Planning and Air Quality Team Leader.
All right, thank you, Michael. Can you all hear me okay?
We can.
All right, so a little bit about my agency first. I actually work for the Federal Highway Administration, which is an agency within the United States Department of Transportation that supports state and local governments in designing, construction, and maintaining the national highway system. The mission of Federal Highway is to enable and empower the strengthening of a world-class highway system that promotes safety, mobility, economic growth, while enhancing the quality of life of all Americans. As defined by our Transportation Secretary, the United States Department of Transportation priorities are: 1, equity, safety, and transformation. We work every day to transform or design the United States transportation system for the future, ensuring that the system is safe for all users while reducing inequalities across the communities that the projects affect. The question that all of you probably have is how? Well, for one, the United States Department of Transportation deliver these primarily in 3 different ways. The first way is financial assistance. Federal aid is allocated to the California Department of Transportation, or formerly known as Caltrans, to carry out the federal transportation program. Additionally, the allocated funding is sub-allocated to the regional agencies such as Southern California Association of Governments in LA, Sacramento Area Council of Governments in Sacramento, and the San Diego Association of Governments in San Diego. The second and third way is through stewardship and oversight. Stewardship is the efficient and effective management of the public funds that we have been entrusted with. And we act to ensure that these federal programs are delivered consistently with the laws and regulations and policies. So what does that mean? So through technical assistance, we work with the state and local agencies to build their capacity for delivering the federal transportation program, while at the same time ensuring that the process is carried out within the law. And so I guess the question then becomes, how do you get involved in that process? Because unlike the other federal agency, our process is really at the regional level and at the state level. Well, in Sacramento region, if you have your computer, feel free to go to www.sacag.org. And you can learn more about the Sacramento Area Council of Governments. If you're in the LA region, go to scag.ca.gov. And then if you're in the San Diego region, go to sangag.gov. And on all of those websites, there are topics about how to get involved, how to get more involved in the process and their grant programs. Thank you. Back to you, Michael.
Thank you very much, Antonio. We'll go ahead and move to our panelists from FEMA, Xing Liu, the Senior Hazard Mitigation Planner.
Thanks for the intro, Michael. Again, my name is Xing Liu. I work for FEMA Region 9. Our office is based out of Oakland, California, and we're probably the newest kid on the block. It's good to see other federal partners, and just start out by saying that structurally we work very much similar to our other federal partners that you have heard from. So we deliver our programs through supporting our states, territories, and tribal partners that also, are looking to implement their programs. So I work for mitigation under FEMA Region 9, and mitigation is really defined as any long-term actions that can be pursued to reduce risk to communities from natural hazards. So I think we bring a little bit of a different perspective to the Promise Zone audience, hopefully from that natural disasters prevention aspect, because I think we are very well known that natural disasters can really affect our disadvantaged communities in a disproportionate manner. So hopefully by having us included in the conversations, we'll maybe include more of a perspective on that regard. So FEMA mitigation actually supports a diverse set of mitigation activities through our grant programs. The one I want to focus on today is called the Building Resilient Infrastructure in Communities. It's our newest mitigation grant program, and through it, we provide federal funds to our states, local communities, tribes, and territories for mitigation activities. It's a FEMA annual hazard mitigation program, annually appropriate, and Section 203 of the Stafford Act authorizes this program. Just to name a few priorities, and hopefully that will string some chords here, is the priorities for BRIC include incentivizing natural hazard risk reduction activities that mitigate risk to public infrastructure, prioritizes benefits to disadvantaged communities, mitigates risk to one or more community lifelines, incorporates nature-based solutions, enhance climate resilience and adaptation, as well as increase funding to applicants that facilitate the adoption and enforcement of the latest published building codes. So right now, BRIC is in its second year and it's still going through evolutions. The money that was made available under BRIC for FY21 was $1 billion for the whole nation. So just wanted to highlight some notable differences from our past FEMA mitigation programs that are now under BRIC. Hopefully these are relevant to our audience. BRIC now includes a new priority to enhance climate resilience and adaptation. It revises the qualitative selection criteria to emphasize equity considerations. It offers direct non-financial technical assistance to help build capability and capacity at the local level and includes disadvantaged communities. It also covers certain management costs associated with managing a federal grant program. And most importantly, it introduces a new category of eligible activities called capability and capacity building. So I really want to highlight what we call the CNCB category, because that's where I see the nexus between the place-based initiatives that we're, really the audience is here for today. So really the purpose of the CNCB, or capability and capacity building, is to enhance knowledge, skill sets, and expertise of the current workforce to expand or improve the administration of mitigation assistance. And there are 4 types of activities that are supported under this broad category. One is building code, adoption and enforcement of building codes. The second one is partnership. And I want to say this one is probably the most important one to our group today, because it allows the funding of activities that leverage a broad network of partners to include all levels of government, to include the private sector, nonprofits, and educational institutions. So FEMA will actually fund projects that have partnership building as its priority. And then there's project scoping. So scoping activities that are designed to develop mitigation strategies and obtain data to prioritize, select, and develop complete applications. From our BRIC FY 2020 selection, I'm happy to announce that there's actually a handful of microgrid projects that were selected in Region 9. So hopefully that's one of the things that some of our promise zones are considering pursuing. And then finally, mitigation planning and planning related activities. This can be used to develop mitigation plans at the community level and also integrate mitigation planning with existing planning efforts, such as comprehensive and economic development planning and disaster recovery planning. So have a lot more supplemental information to share with the group after the fact, but I'll leave it at this higher level. So thanks, back to you, Michael.
Thank you so much, Xing, for your information. That's very helpful. And to move on, we want to move on to our USDA panelists. Leslie Glover is the Program Manager and Office of Urban Agriculture and Innovative Production and Mitigation Planner. I'll turn it over to you, Leslie.
Okay, so I also have with me today, I want to give a shout out to AJ Hawkins, and as was just stated, we represent the Office of Urban Ag and Innovative Production. Just a little bit about the USDA and our connection to this. The USDA, first of all, is made up of 29 agencies and offices with about 100,000 employees who serve the American people at more than 4,500 locations across the country, as well as abroad. And obviously the USDA has a number of programs, thousands. We have an outlay of about $210 billion a year, just to give you an idea of the scope. And so our office, the Office of Urban Ag and Innovative Production, is just one of those 29 agencies. We're primarily focused on urban and innovative agriculture, as the name suggests. But obviously, when you start thinking about producing food, then things like environmental justice, climate, equity, serving historically underserved communities just is a part of that big picture. And so one of the things that we're looking to do is to improve local and regional food systems, make sure that they are more resilient. Obviously, the pandemic really showed a lot of gaps in our local and regional food systems, where communities that were thought to be maybe safe were shown to be more food insecure than we really had thought they would be. And so for our office, the major source of funding comes from the NRCS's Conservation Operations Yearly Appropriation. And that is how we do most of our activities and our authorities. Again, we're a relatively new office. We've only been around for 3 years with the 2018 Farm Bill. And so that yearly appropriation that we get helps to fund 2 of our major financial assistance programs. One of them is the Compost and Food Waste Reduction Agreement Program, and the other one is an Innovative Production Competitive Grant Program. We also did receive an increase this year. I heard one of the other panelists say that they were going to get some additional funding from the American Rescue Plan Act. We also are going to get that one-time infusion of capital to help us beef out those 2 programs that I just mentioned. As far as the Compost and Food Waste Reduction Program, it's an agreement program, so there is a match required there. But that program is designed to help municipalities, counties, local governments, and city planners to carry out planning and the implementation of developing and testing compost plans, and also to reduce food waste and loss. I don't know how many of you are aware, but about a third to half of the food that's produced for human consumption globally is lost or wasted before it gets to people's mouths, which obviously has an effect on greenhouse gas production. And so that particular grant program is designed to try to help us reduce the food loss before it gets to the compost pile, and then also helps us to compost the stuff before it gets to landfills. Then we also have the grant program, which can be used for planning and implementation projects. And those particular programs are both taking into consideration this year whether or not the proposal is going to address issues of food insecurity and nutrition insecurity, particularly in food insecure zip codes. We're also considering the climate impact that the proposal is going to have once implemented. We're also looking at how we can contribute to the USDA and the EPA's goal of cutting our nation's food waste by 50% by the year 2030, which obviously also has an implication for greenhouse gas emission. There are a number of other programs, though, outside of our office that I'll speak a little bit about, and I'll drop some links in the chat for you to follow up on. But the department is also developing a comprehensive strategy, which is going to be centered on voluntary incentives. And it's inclusive of all agricultural producers, landowners, and communities. Every agency and office within the USDA has been required to put together a climate adaptation and implementation plan. And so all of those different 29 plans are going to go into the USDA's larger comprehensive strategy. And along with that are a number of financial assistance programs that can be used by folks like you all in these promise zones to try to help with greenhouse gas emissions and climate issues. So with that, I'll yield back and we can go into more depth as we get into the Q&A portion.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Leslie. I have another question for our panel, but I wanted to remind our participants, please, if you have questions that come up as we're going through, please put those in the chat. We have a team that are reviewing the chat to make sure we get your questions. The next question I'd like to, the pre-prepared question for our panelists is just a brief one, but if you could just give us some insights. What are the steps? What are some steps that organizations can take to apply for the resources that your agency offers? And I'm going to go back to start with our representative from FEMA. Just if you could just give us a quick kind of guidance on how they would do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I will be sharing, just for the audience's information, a couple of resources after the fact. So that will include the BRIC 2021 NOFO fact sheet. Knowing that the BRIC 2021 application period is already over, I do think the NOFO fact sheet will shed light on what the future funding opportunity will look like, given that this is going to be an annual program. I will also be providing program support material for the various categories under the CNCB that I was talking about, as well as a resource called the Mitigation Action Portfolio. Those are actually best practice examples of projects that have been funded, at least partially by FEMA mitigation nationwide. So there may be a lot of common ground to draw from. So my advice for the folks here is, first, really getting into these material and using them to get to know the eligibility criteria and your match requirements. There's usually a match, a local cost share, a match requirement for most federal funding programs that we've been talking about today. So knowing that, you probably need a FEMA approved hazard mitigation plan in order to be eligible to apply for any FEMA hazard mitigation grant program is important. Knowing that there's a 75 to 25% cost share requirement for most projects, unless you qualify under the disadvantaged communities criteria, which will reduce that cost share to a 90-10 divide. So all of that information should be in the NOFO document. So getting really familiar with those documents, getting to know the selection criteria for these resources. It's competitive. Most of the grants are nationally competitive. Although there are state set-aside allocations, you're still competing with other projects within the state. So, reading into these guidelines are really gonna make it clear what we're looking for in terms of funding projects. Getting to know the various application time windows and setting proper expectations around timeline. A lot of folks apply thinking the money will be in their hands tomorrow. It won't happen, unfortunately, with any federal funding source. So really building enough of a cushion around what you apply, what you plan on doing. And then telling a good story. I think we, with a lot of the programs that we're hearing about today, a lot of them are new. So really the opportunity is here for you to shape our selection criteria by telling us a good story about why your project is a good project. And I think, thinking broad and thinking multi-benefit with any project is going to go a long way, because we're essentially offering a whole host of resources. So if you really get creative, you can leverage multiple funding sources to get things done. And this mitigation action portfolio, that best practices resource I was talking about, actually offers a good insight on, with a project, what different funding sources were actually leveraged to make it a success. So I'll just start out with these tippers, I guess.
Thank you very much, Xing. I'll go ahead and just see if our other panelists have anything to add that are might be a little bit different as far as the steps for their agency. I'll go to our USDA panelist, Arthur Hawkins, Assistant State Conservationist from the NDS.
Thank you. I'll just piggyback on what my colleague Leslie Glover had to say, and if he has anything to add, he'll chime in. But at the USDA, our aim is to provide fair and equitable service to all eligible growers. So, that means new and beginning gardeners and farmers as well. So how it works with us, if you haven't worked with USDA previously, your first step should be to contact your USDA Service Center. I'll drop that contact in the link, in the chat. And then what you want to do is make an appointment, and be sure to ask what documents that you might need to bring. And then what you want to do is share with the folks what your vision for your garden or your farm is, and what your challenges are. The USDA, we also have farm coordinators. Some states have NRCS urban conservationists who can help meet your specific needs as an urban farmer. So when you contact your local urban service center, what you can do is find out if your state has one. And if you don't have an urban conservationist, the next best resource will be our district conservationists, and they can walk you through the steps to secure NRCS and FSA funding and technical services. We also have beginning farmer and rancher coordinators. This is a USDA team members who can help you understand the USDA process and find the right assistance for your operation. We have coordinators that are available in every state, and I'll drop a link to those folks in the chat. In addition to our urban service centers, we also have USDA extension and conservation district resources. So we got a lot of different options available to avail yourself. The other type of assistance that we have, as Leslie mentioned, are our grants and our composting food and waste reduction agreement. Basically, those are housed under grants.gov, and you just have to go and register, pay attention to the notice of funding opportunity and all the eligibility criteria, and sign up and go through that process. So I'll drop some links to those resources in the chat, and if you need some higher level assistance, you can contact myself or Leslie Glover, and we can contact you with the California state leadership that manages all of our NRCS and FSA programs. So I'll kick it back over, unless Leslie, you had anything you wanted to add?
No, I think you nailed it. I guess the only other thing I would add is, when it comes to some of the grants and agreements that are coming from agencies outside of NRCS or FSA, you can always go to grants.gov and look up, a particular topic. And each of those different opportunities will specifically tell you who you need to reach out to if you have questions about that particular funding or technical assistance opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you, Arthur and Leslie. It looks like I'm going to go ahead and looks like we might have some questions in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and pass it to my colleague from the Los Angeles field office, our community liaison for the Los Angeles Promise Zone, Alex Russell.
Thanks, Michael. I'm just going to read off the question we have in the chat from CO Crispo from the San Diego Promise Zone. Seeing that these grants are competitive grants at the national level, how are Promise Zone initiatives and communities being prioritized for EO 13985, which is the Advancing Racial Equity and Support for Underserved Communities through the federal government?
Interesting. I can take a stab at that. I started answering that question in the chat. So yeah, thank you. That's a really good question. Under Break 2021, FEMA does prioritize assistance that benefit its advantaged communities. And there's several ways that we do it. Knowing that it's a nationally competitive program, Break actually has set asides for states. So, you know, we wish it's a bigger number, but every state is entitled to $1 million to support you know, essentially the capacity building and capability building type of activities I was talking about earlier. So that C and CB category can be, you know, for it to happen under that state set aside, it's not subject to the national competitiveness of other project grants. And it really helps to build local capacity and technical expertise and partnership opportunities. I would also add that for communities that qualify under the what we consider economically disadvantaged communities criteria, the normal match of 75% to 25% federal to local cost share does get shifted to a 90% to 10% cost share. So those are just some ways that we build equity into the design of our programs. And, you know, love to hear what other federal partners have to say about this.
Leaving it to other panelists in case they also want to add on to anything added.
Yeah, I can add on. So under Federal Highway Program and FTA program, there are a number of activities or assessments that are done as it relates to transportation infrastructure decision-making. Each regional agency or what we call metropolitan planning organization are responsible for developing a assessment process to determine what impact particular projects or investments will have on their communities, including low income and Title VI communities, so environmental justice and Civil Rights Act of 1964. From that, they are then responsible for considering those impacts as they develop their slate of projects and investments. The same is true for the state of California. They also have to do these analysis, and California has a whole process for doing that analysis that take into account the federal requirements, but then also they take into account some of the requirements from California law and the current governor's executive order. In terms of you know, doing business with these organizations, all of these organizations also have to have a DBA number, or DBE number. And what that is, you know, the percentage of all the federal funds that come to those agencies that will be going out to those minority, women-owned and veteran-owned businesses to provide certain services. And so I guess the big thing is, you know, how do you get involved? Again, with those websites, all of those agencies have public involvement plans. Read those public involvement plans and jump into any and every opportunity you get to get involved in that process. And then if in doing that, you still have more questions, feel free to contact myself, my Southern Cal community planner, Michael Morris, or my Sacramento region community planner, Patrick Pennington. And I've put our directory in the chat for everyone to have.
Yeah, this is Scott with EPA. I'll add, in the past, at least for our grant applications, there have been criteria that give points for things like if you're in an opportunity zone. We don't know if they're going to do something like that similar for disadvantaged communities, but for our grants, we do have a number of criteria that appear in the application every round that get at disadvantaged communities, where applicants are asked to talk about the community need and cite demographic and economic data. They're asked to talk about the threats to sensitive populations and their health and welfare, as well as there's usually a criterion around environmental justice. So it is built into our program already, and that criteria, those responses need to be strong to get full points.
And I'm Eric Bias. I work with Scott with the EPA Regional Brownfield program. I would just add that on the 12th, actually, we announced this year's selection, and we gave out $255 million in grants around the country, and 86% of that funding was given to applications that were going to help, would go directly to projects in disadvantaged communities. So it's been a major priority, and we anticipate, nearly 90% of the funding in the future going to it, just from what Scott had just said, because it's such a major critical aspect of our application, and it's always been that way, not just with this change in administration and priorities with Justice 40. So I don't think it'll ever change in the future as well.
Thank you so much for speaking to that question. And I want to let folks know that to ask questions to our panelists. Passing.
Hey,
Mark,
Alex,
no.
we're
Oh.
having some technical issues. It seems like you're cutting out. So I'll go ahead and take over really quick. So we just want to thank our federal partners for participating today, and thank you, Michael Huff, for hosting our federal panel. Feel free to continue to ask questions in the chat. And if our federal panel has some time to stay on and continue to answer those questions, they can do so in the chat. And we'll also be sending a follow-up email with any resources that they would like to share with you. So we're going to go ahead and pass it over to our state panelists. So Mark, feel free to take over when you're ready.
Great, thank you, Ashley. Again, appreciate the time commitment that you all took on behalf of the federal partners. I'm going to transition over to state agency resources that are available for, I focused on community resiliency, and I pulled together various state agencies and representatives that work with programs or technical assistance addressing community or regional resiliency in response to some of the crises we face, such as climate change. I've brought in Rachel Salazar from the California Energy Commission, Dolores Barajas from the Governor's Office of Planning and Research, Jared Perry from Cal OES, the Office of Emergency Services, as well as Meredith. Meredith, I'm going to have to ask you to pronounce your last name. Is that Millet or Millet?
Thanks, it's Millet.
Millet, okay. All right, I'm going to let them self-introduce, introduce themselves. And I will start with Meredith.
Thanks. I'm Meredith Millet from the California Department of Public Health. My pronouns are she, her. And I work in a program that has been small called the Climate Change and Health Equity section. And on a big nutshell, what we try to do is kind of be the public health voice at the climate change table across the board. So giving input to state programs and plans from the public health perspective. But we also give technical assistance, especially to local health departments, but other local groups. And I'll talk more about those resources later.
Great, thank you, Meredith. Jared, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Jared Perry, a hazard mitigation grant specialist with the California Governor's Office of Emergency Services, specifically the Hazard Mitigation Assistance Unit, which helps implement some of FEMA's programs, which Jing spoke about earlier very well when she spoke about the BRIC program. Luckily, I have a couple other items I wanted to cover for you guys as well today, so I'll look forward to speaking about that.
Thank you, Jared. Dolores?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm Dolores Barajas, and I'm the Regional Resilience Grant Program Manager in the Governor's Office within the program known as ICARP, the Integrated Climate Adaptation and Resiliency Program. And I'm happy to share some resources from the ICARP team today.
Thank you, Dolores. And Rachel? Rachel, are you out there? If so, you are on mute. Okay, I can come back to you, Rachel, when I'm unable to unmute or show video. Okay, 1 second. I'll see what I can do. Perhaps try leaving and then coming back into the meeting. We can come back to your introduction once we start with your first question, Rachel. So I have a couple general questions for all panelists from the state representation. And with this one, I'll start with Jared. Jared, can you please describe the technical resources or funding opportunities your department division has to support sustainable development and climate resiliency? And also too, if you could please elaborate on adding this little at the end of the question, I think is really relevant to here. What resources may be available specifically to disadvantaged communities as defined by the California state? Thank you, Jared.
Definitely. So as I spoke, I'm with the Hazard Mitigation Assistance Unit of Cal OES. So we work, we use a lot of FEMA's programs to implement what we do. As you covered earlier with FEMA's BRIC program, which is building resilient infrastructure in communities. We really focus on projects, that address natural hazards or hazard mitigation. BRIC having the goal of promoting resilience and adaptation. But beyond just BRIC, which has that focus for climate change and resiliency, there's the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, which, while it's not annual, funding becomes available every time there's a presidentially declared disaster, where we mirror our priorities to typically what FEMA's stand as. In our current round of funding, our priorities are really to work with projects that implement nature-based solutions to reduce risk or advance climate change adaptation goals. And one of our biggest scoring criteria that we provide additional benefits for is if a jurisdiction is in a disadvantaged community. And we typically score that based on their SVI score from the CDC index to show that those jurisdictions are typically in need. What we did earlier this year, which was our first time funding initiative, was for Prepare California funding initiative for disadvantaged communities that typically haven't been able to apply for this type of funding and didn't have the capacity. So we had a Prepare California initiative that was 100% state funded that would allow them to prepare projects to hire resiliency officers to get the staff they needed and to kickstart those communities in a way that they would have the capacity to apply for our program and implement these projects in the future. So we were really excited for that. We're hoping we can get that to come back again. Still nothing in the budget yet, but right now we're still kind of in a test case, and we're looking to award our first projects within the next month here by June. And so far it's been a really good initiative to help a lot of really in-need communities get that start they need, and we'll hopefully continue to kind of be sustainable and develop that resiliency within communities all across California.
Great, thank you, Jared. I'll switch over to Meredith. Meredith, I understand, so from the California Department of Public Health, you may not necessarily have, be responsible for delivering a program or awarding funding for various programs, but you are a technical, you do provide technical resources. Can you please describe what technical resources your department and division supports for sustainable development, climate resiliency, and also with a focus on disadvantaged communities?
Yeah, great, thanks. And actually, I'm excited to say, I want to talk about all our technical resources because that's what we mostly do, but I'm excited to say that in the upcoming budget, we're optimistic to be getting some funding to actually finally be able to give out some resources to local. So I just want to mention that quickly. This will be a regional climate and health resilience planning grant program. It would be just one-time funding, but it'll be 23 million in local assistance that would fund local health departments, community-based organizations, and tribes to develop climate and health resilience plans. It would be done by region, and it would involve assessing local vulnerability and planning that prioritizes equity. And so we do have that coming up. I don't, it won't even get up and running until this summer if the funding comes through. And we can kind of have our fingers crossed that maybe in the future we could then get even more resources to help fund the plans that the regions come up with. But like you said, meanwhile, we continue to provide what we always have, which is data and tools and technical assistance to help communities assess their local public health vulnerability to climate change impacts, and also to include climate change and equity considerations in their work and their public health interventions. We have a data tool called the Climate Change and Health Indicators for California. You can map climate vulnerability indicators by census tract on that tool. I'll put these links in the chat afterwards. We also just have dedicated staff members who provide TA. We have one staff member now who provides TA to tribes, and one who provides technical assistance to local health departments who are working to have more climate change and resiliency in their programming. And we provide other tools. We have an adaptation planning toolkit for public health, and we have local health department community practice around climate change. And we do a lot of work at the state level, which isn't as relevant here in terms of those resources, but one of the statewide resources I wanted to mention is that we run, as part of the state's climate action team, a public health work group where we put on maybe 3 or 4 times a year, and it just is on different topics. Our most recent one was on the impact of climate change on workers. We've had them on drought, wildfire, health, heat and health, mental health even. And it's become a webinar format where we bring experts together to discuss that issue and share resources. So anyone can sign up for that. And I can also put the link in to sign up for our newsletter to learn about those things.
Great, thank you, Meredith. There's a question I think we could address quickly was, how are those regions defined? Are they consistent? I know SURF's a new program, and I know that some state agencies are beginning to align some of their programs with SURF. How are your regions defined?
These are defined by public health planning regions. And I don't remember, I can look up the exact title of those regions and I'll put it in the chat.
Okay, thank you. Next, Rachel, we hopping out. Thank you for coming back in. When I ask you your question, feel free to introduce yourself as well. Again, describing the technical resources or funding opportunities generally available, as well as those that are that have some priority or emphasis for disadvantaged communities.
Sure. I'm Rachel Salazar. I work in the R&D division here at the California Energy Commission. I work under a grant program called EPIC. So we provide up to $130 million annually to fund clean electricity technologies that benefit the electricity ratepayers that fund our program. So those are ratepayers in the state's three largest IOUs. That's PG&E, Southern California Edison, and San Diego Gas and Electric territories. I also work on a number of activities to support our equity and outreach for the program, because EPIC does have minimum targets for how much investment gets deployed in both disadvantaged and low-income communities. And as far as the programs and resources that we have here at the Energy Commission, you know, there are a number of programs, so I'm just going to highlight a few that I think might be of more interest today, but certainly reach out. So there's the BUILD program in our efficiency division. They offer technical assistance and incentives for new construction of all electric low-income residential buildings. There is also the California Electric Home Program that provides assistance for new single-family and multifamily residential buildings. The EPIC program, as I mentioned, that I work in, we cover a host of clean energy technologies such as renewable energy, microgrids, energy storage, vehicle to grid and vehicle to building systems. And building decarb is for sure one of the key funding areas. So I expect to see some funding opportunities on the horizon in the next couple of years. EPIC also provides entrepreneurial support. So we have a small grant program called CalSeed that makes available up to $600,000 for early stage startups. And then we also have something called regional innovation clusters that provide support services such as laboratory equipment and buildings, some business plan development, and connections to investors for startups. So the two that I wanted to call out today, considering where the Promise Zones are located, is our Los Angeles Clean Tech Incubator, also known as LACY, and the Clean Tech San Diego. And, you know, just like Meredith had said, you know, we're looking forward to, you know, over $6 billion coming to the Energy Commission from the governor's proposed budget. Notably, we're looking at about $922 million for equitable building decarb, 380 for long duration energy storage, and a bunch of others. So I'll stop there.
Great, thank you, Rachel. Dolores next, and I'm gonna ask you a two-part question. And then with the second question, I'm gonna snake back around in opposite order of which I started. So for the first question, please describe the technical resources and programs OPR has available for climate resiliency and sustainable development. And then second, how can the Promise Zones and Promise Zone communities and partner organizations utilize the tools or implement the programs that you're working on or get involved?
Sure. So as I mentioned, ICARP is a program of the Governor's Office of Planning and Research. And within ICARP, you know, we're basically a hub to coordinate have a coordinated response to climate change across the state. And there are several teams within ICARP, but I'll highlight two. One is the Climate Services team, which provides guidance, tools, and technical assistance, best practices, and manages the Adaptation Clearinghouse, which is a great resource for case studies and reports, best practices on climate adaptation and resiliency. So I can also drop a link in the chat for that particular resource, and I'm happy to connect folks with the team members that lead that work. And also within the Climate Services team specific to vulnerable communities, I know they also have a vulnerable communities platform as well, specific matrix and data for communities that are most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. So, and I know that they are also hiring an associate planner for that particular program if anyone's interested or wants to share that news. The grant programs, which I would love to share more about, is another great resource and new to the climate team. We have 3 grant programs that are under development. There is the Adaptation Planning Grants Program, which is led by my colleague, Abby Edwards, and has already gotten underway. And I believe they are working on guideline development at this point. So there's still opportunity to be engaged in that process. Later on this year, you will hear more about a community resilience and heat grant program that will help communities prepare for the impacts of extreme heat. So that is probably our most green grant program that you'll hear about later on this year. And my grant program, the Regional Resilience Planning and Implementation Grants Program, will support regions in advancing resilience through capacity building, planning, and project implementation. And the program will invest $250 million to support regional scale climate resilience. So I know we touched on regions just a second ago. The funds will be invested over 3 cycles, available to local, regional, and tribal governments. And the program will fund projects that improve regional climate resilience and reduce the risk of climate impacts. We are at a very early stage with the process. So this is a great opportunity to engage in the listening sessions, which we will be kicking off later this summer in mid to late July at our first technical advisory council meeting. And so at this point, we have some parameters set in place for the grant program, but much of it will be informed by the listening sessions, the needs, how we can align it with other climate funding as well. And the first cycle will be looking to invest 25 million, and that will include some funding for regional climate adaptation planning and action plans as well. So I can share further. And what was your second question? I'm sorry, Mark.
Partially addressed already, but how can the Promise Zone communities as well as their partner organizations get involved with activities?
Yeah, so yeah, I think I kind of touched on that. The link that I shared for the climate resilience, the adaptation clearinghouse, which is resilienca.org, that's kind of the resource hub of data, best practices and case studies, which I know we've been hearing a lot about in terms of wanting those resources, and then engaging in the listening session process, and engaging with the program managers directly as well. We'd love to hear what the needs are, what are some ideas, as we we're really in the early stages of developing the grant program. So I'm going to drop a link in here for the grants page as well.
Great. And if it's available, perhaps a newsletter subscription, something that they can register for so that they can stay apprised of various updates and announcements. That'd be excellent.
I have a very long link, but I promise it takes you directly to the constant contact. I don't want to overwhelm the chat with links, but I do have that link there.
All right. Thank you, Dolores. Okay, same question, the second part of it for Rachel. How can the Promise Zone communities and their partner organizations get involved, perhaps with, with your programs? How can they access those resources?
Yeah, so a handful of years ago, we actually created an online resource called Empower Innovation. So this platform features a number of events and funding opportunities, not only from the California Energy Commission, but other federal, state, and local agencies providing climate and clean energy technologies, funding for these technologies. We just surpassed 3,000 members and over 800 organizations representing researchers, policymakers, environmental justice, and community organizations, tech developers. So it's a very valuable resource. Would encourage everybody, to check it out. You can create a profile for free and start networking with other interested stakeholders for project development. Additionally, we have an energy partnership program that can help identify the most cost-effective and energy-saving opportunities for both existing and new construction. And then aside from that, I would say, get involved by attending scoping workshops for programs, especially those that will be in the works in the next couple of years. This is your opportunity to help inform how these get shaped and how they can best benefit the communities that you all are working in. We also, for all of our solicitations, whether that's through the programs administered here in R&D or our Clean Transportation Division, we have pre-application workshops. It's an opportunity to learn a little bit more information, ask clarifying questions. And similarly, we have Energy Commission listservs. So I'll drop a link for the Empower Innovation and listservs in the chat here in just a second.
Great, thank you, Rachel. I think next will be Meredith. How can the Promise Zone organizations and partner organizations, communities benefit from the tools and technical resources that you provide?
Yeah, they mostly, you can go to our website and kind of check them out. A lot of them are online. Joining our newsletter to find out more, to keep updated. And that would also include joining our public health work group to learn through that. So checking them out online themselves, but people can always contact us and ask any additional questions or help with learning some of the tools. And then hopefully that those resources will also help when this grant program gets up and running. And in general, though, I would say that connecting with us at CDPH is good, but if your promise zone might already have a partner in your local health department, and if they don't, I would highly recommend, trying to connect with your local health department and bringing that health perspective in and seeing what resources they have and what they're working on as well.
Great, thank you, Meredith. And wrapping up this question, Jared?
Yeah, of course. So the hazard mitigation grant program and the programs that go along with hazard mitigation, well, there's a lot of resources out there. They can be very difficult to navigate. I know Jing is going to share the mitigation action portfolio that gives you an example of some projects. But Cal OES, the hazard mitigation assistance unit, we're here to help you guys. We want to talk to you about your projects and what's going on with your community. I'm going to drop our outreach email notification listserv in the chat that will share upcoming webinars, deadlines, and notice of funding opportunities. But really, the biggest resource is our HMA inbox, because we do a lot of scoping calls from the very beginning. There's some intricacies of the program that can be hard to fully understand just by reading through it. So we're happy with any jurisdiction at any time to really set the technical assistance or scoping call, talk through what type of hazards your community is facing, see what kind of resiliency you guys want to build, and see what type of program under hazard mitigation you best fit under, and work with you guys to get there. So I'll get those, both the our email notification listserv dropped in the chat, and then our general inbox if you guys have questions or want to set up a call.
Great, thank you, Jared. I have one more general question. I'm not sure if it's applicable, so I'll ask it, and then if it applies to your organization or your department, please feel free to chime in. But a goal of the Promise Zones is to leverage state, federal, and other types of funding sources together to achieve greatest results. Are there any programs that you think that we've heard today, or others that we haven't heard today, that can be used in part, that can be used synchronously or together in order to achieve greater benefit? Which ones have that leverage capability, either those that we heard or haven't heard today? Any that you can recall off the top of your head? And I'm not going to call on anyone specific, but if you feel free, please chime in.
I'll jump in. So as we're developing this new grant program on resilience, and that's something that we're looking at initially, is how this grant program can complement other resources, both state and federal, through some of the work that our team members focus on. I know that the CDBG disaster recovery program, I'm not sure if that one was already mentioned by Jared, but also I do believe he mentioned FEMA's BRIC program as well. We're really interested in seeing how we can align those programs potentially, or at least kind of map that out for applicants on the opportunities for alignment.
I guess I'll go ahead and offer, the EPIC program does offer cost sharing. Currently, it is open for federal funding programs, but in our fourth investment plan, which we hope to get approved very soon from the California Public Utilities Commission, we are looking to extend that. So that would cover additional state, private, and nonprofit funding programs. So, EPIC funds can be leveraged that way. I also wanted to call out For those that might be familiar with the self-gen incentive program, I know one of the biggest criticisms is, it's a rebate program. And so especially for priority communities, trying to even come up with that advance payment can be difficult. So the Golden State Financing Authority does have an advance rebate payment program. It's a bridge loan program that essentially front loads the cost for the homeowner or for the folks that are going to be getting these installations. So I would encourage folks that are kind of interested in self-gen, but a little reluctant because of that reason, to go check it out. They do have a priority for folks that are in the higher fire threat districts, or maybe that have experienced multiple power shutoffs and really require electricity for medical and health and safety reasons.
Great, thank you, Rachel. I know we've got 5 minutes left. I'm going to ask the panel or ask the audience if they have any questions. Please feel free to share them in the chat, or I'll take everybody off of the spotlight so that we can see the full panel. If not, then Jared or Meredith can chime in with ways in which either communities can leverage their programs with various other types of funding programs, including federal or local regional investments. All right, not hearing anything. So I'm going to remove spotlight from everybody. So all right, let's see who we all have here. Okay, thank you very much for everybody for your participation in this. I know it was kind of unceremonious ending to our state panel, but if anybody has any follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out to either myself or the HUD team. I'm happy to transfer those questions over to our various partners here. And again, I thank my state agency representatives, Meredith, Jared, Dolores, and Rachel, for taking the time out of your day, sharing these resources with the Promise Zone team. And I believe to wrap up today's convening, I'll be kicking it over back to HUD and Carol Harper-Berry.
All right, so it looks like I'm going to be covering for Carol, so I'll just give you guys a quick closing. We just want to thank our federal partners and our state partners for taking the time to join us here today, and we especially want to thank our Promise Zone partners as well. We know that your time is very valuable, and you guys are stretched really thin right now, going through the pandemic. So again, we just appreciate everyone's time today, and we look forward to continuing this conversation. We will be having our second session on sustainable economic recovery and resilience in just a few more weeks on June 22nd, I believe. So if you have not received the invite for that, please reach out to myself and we will make sure we get that over to you. We are also recording this session so that you guys can share it out with additional Promise Zone partners. So please feel free to do that. We will be sending that in an email following this meeting, along with a lot of the resources that were put in the chat. And again, as Mark mentioned, please feel free to reach out to myself or Mark, and we will put you in contact with the federal and state partners that you heard from today. So thank you all and have a good rest of your day.